Hi friends, I'm Mike and this is Mike Chats on my small YouTube channel that I'm running mostly as a benefit for Ukraine. And of course, with the events of the current week, there's a lot to chat about. Now, I was actually going to make this lighthearted short segment because towards the end of Thursday, I was feeling a bit optimistic. Yes, I had made a worried post on Thursday morning mentioning that maybe Zelensky shouldn't be heading to the US, which was genuine, but I had felt somewhat cautiously reassured by Trump's comments the following day, where he could no longer remember that he had called Zelensky a dictator. So the segment I was thinking of doing today was going to be very short and lighthearted because I felt that Trump had delivered us another gem of his speechcraft in that particular snippet, one that really deserved to be read out loud in a deliberate manner. Allow me to demonstrate. Now first, let's remind ourselves of the exact question, though, that he was answering there on Thursday in this wonderful clip. Mr. President, you've talked about having common ground with Keir Starmer, but there are things you disagree on as well. You've described Zelensky as a dictator. He described President Putin as a dictator. Do you see that as a problem? Now, notice how precisely and astutely Trump answers the question. The relationship, President Zelensky and President Putin is not a good one. You've noticed, right? It's not a good one. It's not a good relationship. And we're going to have to try and work something out. Sometimes that happens. I get along with both. I have a very good relationship with President Putin. I think I have a very good relationship with President Zelensky, and now we're doing the deal. And we're going to be in there. We're going to be actually in there, digging our hearts out. And hopefully, we need the rare earth. And we have some here, but we don't have enough. Our economy is very strong, and we need a lot of things that in some cases we don't have here. So I think we're going to have a very good relationship. But the relationship between them is not the best. So that was going to be it. That was going to be the segment. If a relatively boring deal with no particular commitments had been signed yesterday, my segment would have been done. Because in general, I don't just comment on news, simply because I don't have time to make videos during the week. But then last night, of course, we had this. I was out at the time it was happening, so I was only catching updates on my phone. I ended up having to go home and watch it, and watch it, and watch it, and suddenly I realized it was 4 a.m. and I'd been obsessively scrolling through different videos of follow-ups and interviews with Zelensky and commentary from left and right. And probably like most of you, I was on the one hand elated that Zelensky actually left the US safely, based on my worst case scenario. But what actually did happen was definitely the second worst case scenario. Now, I really encourage everyone to actually watch the entire press conference from the beginning to form their own perspective. But here's my summary. First off, Zelensky is very cordial. Thankful, actually saying thank you repeatedly to President Trump.
Please, I'd like to say something.
No, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for the invitation. And really, I hope that this first document, will be a first step to real security guarantees for Ukraine.
And both Trump and Zelensky are being cordial to one another. Trump then makes an ass out of himself because he can't remember that they're called rare earths. Now, actually, this could have been intentional. Trump baiting Zelensky into correcting him so that he could get offended or aggressive may have been the point. If that's the case, Zelensky at this point was wise not to get into it.
How does this provide long-term security for Ukraine?
Well, we don't know exactly how much because we're going to be putting some money in a fund that we're going to get from the raw earth that we're going to be taking and from the use of raw earth. And as you know, our country doesn't have much raw earth. We don't have a lot of the raw earth. They have among the best in the world in terms of raw earth. So we have a lot of oil and we have a lot of gas. We have a lot, but we don't have raw earth. This has just about every component of the raw earth that we need.
Later, Zelensky mistakenly says he still trusts Trump to be on Ukraine's side.
President Zelensky, do you feel like the U.S. is on your side, that the President Trump is on your side at this moment?
I think that the United States on our side from the very beginning of occupation, and I think that President Trump on our side.
Zelensky has one notable badass answer to a guy who tries to bully him about not looking corporate.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest, why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see people. Do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not
Really?
respecting the dignity of this office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something like this.
Something like
Yes,
yours.
sir.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Then it gets surreal, because someone from the press accuses England of prosecuting thought crimes. So Rubio and JD Vance talk about how important it is for the US to safeguard freedom of speech in all forms and venues for Americans.
And so this is a point the Vice President made at Munich, and I think it's a very compelling one, that what unites us with Europe, as much as anything else, is these shared values, and one of them being free speech. And so if Americans are threatened by it, we're going to need to take action in that regard.
We believe Americans have the right to speak their mind, even if we in this room disagree with them. They have the right to speak their mind in the public square, which is often online these days.
After more than 40 minutes of this, overall, but Zelensky never putting a foot wrong in this one, JD Vance waits for the key line, one last question from Trump, and then pulls the trigger.
All right, one more question.
I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy.
He delivers two incredibly insulting statements that are clearly scripted and have nothing to do with the rest of the conversation to this point, and they're incredibly inappropriate for a vice president to be delivering to the actual head of state of another nation, which is almost certainly extra insulting on purpose, just like it was in Europe a few weeks earlier.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but
He triggers some disagreements from Zelensky, finally, including the new excessively and deliberately hypocritical accusation that Zelensky should not feel like he's entitled to speak his mind in front of the American media.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
This is then Trump's cue to act outraged in whatever haphazard way he sees fit, and over the next few minutes, the clearly pre-agreed attack by Trump, JD, and Marco Rubio plays out. It's a classic setup that has played out in boardrooms all over the world many times a year for as long as there have been big companies. Zelensky wasn't ready for it here. He held his own, given the circumstances, I think, and the degree to which he was outnumbered and disrespected here. He's as heroic as ever, but this isn't what he's trained for. You have to be trained in boardroom manipulation to get through something like this, and actually there the first rule would be that you never go into a situation where you're not 100% sure you're truly supported and welcome if you're going to be outnumbered.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country? Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Even today, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
allowed.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
allowed.
in this
We
cabinet.
gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank-
president, $350 billion.
You voted
We gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
you invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say
You can be sure that TASS and Fox's audiences will never see the first 40 minutes of this press conference. The TASS ones, because they'll never be allowed to find it anywhere, and the second ones, because they can be trusted not to find it, instead trusting that anyone disputing the later released statements by Fox and so on that Zelensky had started an argument is spreading CNN-style fake news. Zelensky didn't start any arguments. One more thought I have to leave you with, and this is also increasingly clear from events like this. Again, I have to reiterate that Europe can't fool itself in any way anymore. The path that this administration has chosen has been predetermined, and any mixed signals about whether they still might or might not support Ukraine or Europe in some constructive way is strictly a time-wasting tactic, in my opinion. Getting Europe to dither rather than actually really act as resolutely as possible, as quickly as possible. And it's not even up to Trump, I don't think. You may think now that JD is two-faced because he turned Trump supporter and now he's saying what Trump wants him to say. But I strongly encourage you to think again. I think, if anything, that Trump is probably more afraid of the people he now finds himself surrounded by than he is even of Putin himself. These are psychopaths who will definitely abandon and sell out Ukraine and Europe for one simple reason. Right now, Russia is cheap. Russian companies have been struggling, and they're cheap. They can be bought low. These billionaires can buy up pretty much all Russian companies at low prices right now, and then see them managed back up to high values by pushing the rest of the world out of Russia's way. And that's what they'll do. And there's no other motivation that matters to them. Human lives don't matter to them. Trust doesn't matter to them. Historical alliances don't matter to them. These are the tech billionaire Peter Thiel and Elon Musk crowd now. This is what they are. Europe fines them for being too aggressive with how they treat their users, so they sell it out. They can divest from Europe, invest in Russia, and then tilt the world in Russia's favor. When it's milked, they can turn it back around, buy or start European companies, and then tilt the world back in Europe's favor, and then sell that later. That's the level of power they've risen to, and they're drunk on that power, and they're in a culture of their own where this way of thinking is simply treated as rational. And anything that would cloud this kind of simple, rational financial decision to buy a country's assets low and sell them high, no matter what it does to people who are less powerful, is treated as some kind of an emotional disorder that they can't even relate to. That's who JD Vance, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and their friends are. Nothing less, nothing more. All right, sorry I couldn't make this one funny, but I don't think it would have been appropriate to do that. Just remember, it's not over. In fact, just today, I saw some articles finding that Europe has already managed to start delivering more shells to Ukraine, and another positive development this week was that Ukraine seems to have started finding much more effective ways to counter Russia's glide bombs. I hope we start to see some effect of that on stabilizing the front lines and keeping Russia's gains smaller in 2025 than they even were in 2024, which was already pathetic. Slava Ukraini, take care of yourselves, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.